There is no part of our human body more exotic than the brain. And you may wonder, since each of our organs has a specific role and a predetermined function, why do we specifically focus on the brain? But when you understand the meaning, all the confusion will be gone, and the vision will become clear. Here we will ask for help from one of the distinguished doctors named Dean Burnett through his book The Idiot Brain, which is a book that focuses on the strange and special processes of the brain, and the irrational behaviors produced by those processes that are carried out by this human organ. Although it presents one of the basics of the human body, its weirdness is that it is a complex set of chaotic habits that have evolved over millions of years to reach its complexity today in a world open to all levels of human weirdness. So is the brain the controller of all the processes that we do? What are the limits and levels of control? These are the questions that the book is trying to answer. The Idiot Brain, by Dean Burnett. Have you ever asked such a question? How does the brain regulate the body? And how does it usually leave behind chaos? Perhaps such questions may come to your mind, but the important thing is not only your question, but the answer to it as well. You must know that the brain of the primitive man was successful, otherwise the human race would not have been able to continue its journey of thought until this moment. But what is interesting about all this journey is that despite the progress made by all of our minds, but our old brain functions have not disappeared. On the contrary, these functions have become more important than before. The brain needs the body to ensure its existence, and the body needs the brain to control it. As a result of this integral relationship, the largest part of the human brain has become dedicated to physiological processes, coordinating its automatic responses to the problems. And this is to know that these functions performed by the brain are basically what the primitives were doing. But today, our mental abilities have become unimaginable due to awareness, attention and recognition that occurred as a result of this development, and the leap that man achieved over millions of years. Bit to remember, despite the development of the human brain, but its old functions has not completely disappeared. As we all know, food is fuel. This is obvious, because when your body needs energy, you eat, and when it doesn't need energy, you don't eat. What you should understand very well is that the brain practices a certain level of control over our eating and appetite. You might think that the intestines and stomach are responsible for this, but this is not true. It is not only stomach cells that affect our appetite, as hormones also play an important role. Leptin is a hormone produced by your stomach to reduce your appetite, and ghrelin is a hormone produced by your stomach to increase your appetite. Habits are also very important in our diet, as once the brain begins to expect things, the body begins to follow its expectations. Habits and their effects have dangerous impacts on our diet and everything related to our personal life. Once your brain and body adapt to a certain habit, it becomes almost impossible to quit. If you are still not sure that the brain controls the diet, consider eating disorders such as anorexia nervosa and bulimia. Here the brain is able to convince the body that its shape is much more important than food. So the body does not need food. This may not seem logical to you, but it happens in a way that causes concern. Bit to remember, the brain is responsible for our diet and the nature of eating, not just direct organs such as the stomach and intestines. Do you know that our survival as human beings depends on meeting our biological needs such as sleep, movement and eating? But this is not enough, as you can see that dangers surround us from every side, just waiting for the opportunity to capture us because nature is unforgiving. Fortunately, millions of years full of brain development has enabled us to develop defensive methods to respond to any expected danger, which are coordinated with remarkable speed and efficiency by our brain. We are fearful beings, so we have strong reactions to every fear, even if it is not dangerous for us, but our brain is not convinced that it is harmless. Even if we all lived in sterile bubbles and all sharp edges turned smooth, our brain would not stop thinking about death and fear. What you must understand is that the fight and flight response or fear in general begins in the brain. The information reaches the brain through the senses, and it is received in its usual place. These information may be unfamiliar, or familiar, but it causes concern. For example, if you were in a forest and you hear a roar, it is something unfamiliar, but if you were at home alone and you hear footsteps upstairs, it is familiar but awful. The sensory signs here reach the brain, all of them are accompanied by a sign that there is something not good. If the brain does not find enough information to make sure that what is happening is safe, it calls for its fight and flight response. Bit to remember, our survival as human beings requires meeting other needs along the biological needs, and responding to fight and flight is one of them. Do you remember that girl who was studying with you at school the first day you entered? She was sitting next to you, right? She was a beautiful girl, with dark hair, and big eyes. Do you still remember her? What is her name then? You will certainly not remember anything about her name, but all her features are still stuck in your mind. Do you know why we keep the faces without the names? There is a secret. Faces have a lot to tell us. Facial expressions, eye contact, and mouth movements are all basic expressions and ways of human communication. It seems that the brain has developed many advantages that help and enhance the recognition of human features. This is what makes you know many of the details of the people you met. The brain has many ways to make use of short-term memory. For example, the brain system tends to remember the first thing you hear or the last thing you hear, because the brain is a very complex intersection of connections and linkages, like a ball of light bulbs in the size of the universe. Bit to remember, the brain has an amazing ability to remember pictures more than names.